All right, let's learn about the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so remember, Pythagorean theorem's only for right triangles, right? The Pythagorean theorem says that it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and what that means is that the legs squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Well, the legs of a right triangle are the sides that touch the right angle. They make up the right angle. Those are the legs. That's our A and B. All right, the hypotenuse, C, is always across from the right angle. The diagonal, that is C, that's our hypotenuse. And you can see here, if I take a leg squared, so this leg is 3, and if I square it, 3 squared is 9. I get 9 squares there, right? This leg here is 4. 4 squared is 16, so I have 16 squares here, right? And this is my hypotenuse. My hypotenuse here is 5. If I add the 3 squared plus the 4 squared, it should equal that 5 squared. So I have 9 greens and I have 16 of these pinks that make 25 total, and that is 5 squared. All right? So remember, Pythagorean theorem for right triangles, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's the two legs, the sum of the two legs squared equal the hypotenuse. All right, so let's try one. We're going to try this one over here on the right. It says solve for the missing side, round to the nearest tenth. All right? So I know the Pythagorean theorem's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I know I'm going to use this because it's a right triangle. It's only used for right triangles, right? So if I'm looking for the missing side, I got to figure out what's the missing side. Is it a, is it b, or is it c, right? So I see that this is my missing side right here, and that's across from my right angle. So that means that is c. So I'm solving for c. So that means that this 7 and this 10 are a and b. It doesn't matter which one you label a or b. The important one is c. Right? Because we're adding, you can add in any order. That's the reason why A and B don't matter which one is which. So I labeled 7A, so I'm going to plug in 7 for A, so 7 squared, and then I'm going to plug in 10 for B, it'll be 10 squared, and I don't know what C is, so that's just going to stay C squared. All right, so my next step is I'm going to square the numbers that I know. So remember, squared means the base times itself, right? So 7 squared is 7 times 7, which is 49. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. C squared is, we don't know because we don't know what C is, so we just keep it C squared. So first step, figure out what's A, B, and C. Then I'm going to plug it into my formula and then square the numbers. All right, so now I want to add these together. 49 plus 100 is 149. All right, so now I'm left with 149 equals C squared. I don't want to know what C squared is. I want to know what C is, right? So to get with c by itself, I have to do the opposite of squared. And the opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root. So I'm going to take a square root to both sides, and that's going to cancel out that squared there and just leave me with c. All right, and then I'm going to take the square root of 149. So I'm going to use my calculator here. Remember, on the SOL, you're allowed to use Desmos, right? So square root 149, and we got 12.20. This says round to the nearest tenth. The tenth is my first decimal place, so that's that 2. If I look to the right of it, there's a 0 there, so that means that 2 is going to stay the same, so this would be 12.2. And that is my answer for C. Okay? All right, let's try another one where we're going to solve for A and B. Okay, let's try this right triangle here. So if it's a right triangle, I know I'm going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? My most important one to find is C. I know C is across from the right angle, so here's my right angle. I go across from it. I know that is C, right? So 15, I know I'm going to plug in for C. So instead of C squared, I'm going to put 15 squared. Okay? All right, so now I see that this is my missing side, and my missing side is touching this right angle, so I know that's either A or B. I like just to make my missing side A, so I'm going to make that side A and keep that A squared. We're going to keep that A. All right, so that means 13 here is going to be B, and I'm going to plug 13 in for B. So instead of B squared, I'm going to write 13 squared. So the first step is know it's a right triangle, and we're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then figure out what's a, b, and c, right? C is across from the right angle. All right, so now I can square the numbers that I know. I don't know what a is, so that's just going to stay a squared. I do know what 13 squared is, right? That's 13 times 13, and that's 169. All right, and I'm going to put my equal sign. 15 squared is 15 times 15, which is 225. All right. Okay, so from here, I want to get A by itself. That's my whole goal here, is to figure out what A is, right? So if this says A squared plus 169, I need to get rid of that 169, so I'm going to do minus 169. And what that's going to do is that's going to cancel this out on this side. and leave me with a squared, right? But since this isn't an equation, I have to do the same thing to both sides to keep it equal. So I need to do 225 minus 169. And I can put that in the calculator, right? 225 minus 169 is 56. So I have 56. All right, so once again, this is a squared. I don't want to know what a squared is. I want to know what a is. So the opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root. And I'm going to do that to both sides to keep this equation equal. And when I do that, that gets rid of this squared part and leaves me with a, because the opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root. So now the square root of 56, let's put that in here. Square root 56 is 7.48. Let's round to the tens place again. So the tens place is my 4. I look to the right of it, it's an 8. So that 8 is telling me I got to bump that 4 up to a 5. So this would be 7.5. And then this is being measured in yards. So I'm going to put YD for yards. Okay, so when you're solving for a missing side, you're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then you have to figure out what's a, what's b, and what's c, and then plug it into the formula, square your numbers, and then solve for the missing side. Okay, sometimes they'll give you some numbers, and they'll say, is this a right triangle? And the way you can tell that is if we know it's a right triangle, if it's going to be a right triangle, we have to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? So if I plug those numbers in, then I can figure out if it's a right triangle or not. So remember I told you C is the most important thing? That's our hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, or C, is always the longest side. So whatever number is the biggest, I know has to be C. A and B doesn't matter which one's which. I usually just go in order. Whatever one they give me first is A, then B, right? So then we just plug it into our formula, but C has to be the biggest side. Has to be, okay? So let's write that down. A we said was 9, so 9 squared. B we said was 40, so that'd be 40 squared. And C we said was 41, so it'd be 41 squared. All right, now I'm going to square my numbers. All right, so let's see, 9 squared I know off the top of my head. That's 81. 40 squared is 1600. And then 41 squared is 1681, 1681. All right, so now I want to add this side together and see if it equals this side. Well, 81 plus 1600 is 1681, which equals 1681. So this is a right triangle. This is a right triangle. So is it a right triangle? Yes, it is. Okay? So all you do is you have to figure out what's A, what's B, and what's C, plug it into your formula. If the two sides equal each other, you know it's a right triangle. C has to be the largest side. Okay, so let's try this one on the right here. See if this is a right triangle. All right, so they gave me 8, 15, and 9. And what I did is I plugged it into a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I put 15 in for c because that's my largest number they gave me, and I know that c has to be the largest side, right? So from here, what I do is I square my numbers just like I did, right? On this one over here. 8 squared is 64. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 squared is 9 times 9, which is 81. 15 squared is 15 times 15, which is 225. All right, so now I want to add these two together and see if it equals 225. If it equals 225, it is a right triangle. If it does not equal 225, it is not a right triangle, right? So we're going to do 64 plus 81, and that gives me 145. So these two do not equal each other. They do not equal each other, right? 145 does not equal 225. So is this a right triangle? This is not a right triangle. So to tell if something's a right triangle or not, C has to be your largest side. You plug it into a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and the two sides equal each other, it is a right triangle. If they do not equal each other, it is not a right triangle. All right, sometimes with that Pythagorean theorem, they'll give you word problems, all right? So word problems, sometimes it's beneficial to draw a picture so you can see what's A, B, and C, all right? So this one says, John puts the base of an 8-foot ladder 4 feet from the wall of his house. How far up the wall does the ladder reach? Okay, so we know we have a wall of a house, and he's putting a ladder up against it. Here's my ladder, all right? And then said the bottom of the ladder, the base of the ladder, is 4 feet from the wall, and the ladder is 8 feet long, They want to know how far up this is. So we don't know how far up the wall the ladder reaches, right? And you can see that this makes a right triangle, right? Here's my right angle. So what do we know? Well, we know that 8 there, the ladder, has to be C because it's the side that's across from my right angle. So that we know is C. So that means that this is A and B, right? So I don't know this side, so I'm going to make this side A, and I'm going to make this side B. And then I'm going to plug it into the formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. All right, so I've labeled what's A, B, and C, right? We did that. We got our formula, and we plugged it in. B we said was 4, C we said was 8, and A we didn't know. All right, so then from here, we're going to square it. A squared, we don't know what A squared is, so that just makes A squared. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. All right, so now I'm solving for A. I want to get A by itself. So that means I want to get rid of that 16. So the way I get rid of that 16 is I'm going to do minus 16, because this is getting added to the A right now. So I have to do the opposite to get rid of it and leave me with just A squared. And whatever I do to one side of my equation, I have to do to my other side of my equation. So I'm going to do minus 16 on this side. All right, so 64 minus 16. Let's see what that is. Let's clear this out. 64 minus 16 is 48. So I'm left with A squared equals 48. But remember, I don't want to know what A squared is. I want to know what A is. So that means I have to take the square root of this to figure out what A is, right? Because the opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root. So that's what gets rid of this squared and leaves me with A. So now I got to take the square root of 48. So let's see what that is. Square root of 48 is 6.928. All right, and this says round to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth is my second decimal place. My second decimal place is here. It's at 2. So I look to the right of it, and there's an 8 there. That 8 tells me I have to bump that 2 up to a 3. All right, 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, we let it go. So this is really 6.93. 6.93, and this is all being measured in feet, right? So I would put feet. And that's how far up my wall this ladder reaches. All right, let's try this one over here. It says a television is identified by the diagonal measurement of the screen. So if you go to like Walmart and you see the TVs there and it says a 50-inch TV, what that means is they're measuring it from corner to corner, diagonally, right? So a TV is like a rectangle, right? So I'm gonna draw a rectangle. And it says the TV has a 65-inch screen. So that means my diagonal of my screen is 65 inches. 65 inches. All right? It says its height is 34 inches. So the height of the TV is 34 inches. They want to know what's the length, right? Or the width of the TV. We don't know this part here. So I can see that here's my right angle. I know that C is 65. That's my diagonal. So I know this is C. I don't know these two, so I'm going to make this one A, and I'm going to make this one B. And then I'm going to plug it into my formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. All right, so now that it's in my formula, now I can square the numbers that I know, right? So A squared, I don't know what A squared is, so that just makes it, I'm going to keep it A squared. 34 squared is 34 times 34, which is 1,156. And 65 squared is 65 times 65, which is 4,225. All right, so now I want to get A by itself, remember? So I want to do minus 1,156 to both sides to leave me with A squared by itself. And when I do that, I do 4,225 minus 1,156, I get 3,069. All right, so 3,069, that tells me what A squared is, but I want to know what A is. So that means I have to take my square root to get rid of that squared sign and just leave me with A. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So I'm taking that square root of 3,689. So square root of 3069 is 55.398, right? So let's round to the tenths place. So the tenths place is at 3. I look to the right is a 9. So that tells me that 9 is going to bump that 3 up to a 4. So 55.4. So 55.4, and this is measured in inches. All right, so Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. C has to be your largest side. Don't be afraid to use Desmos. Desmos could help you out tremendously, especially when there's big numbers like this one here, right? All right, hope that was a good review, and I'll see you next time. Bye.